I'm 47-year-old man Jason. To obtain some guidance, I would want to relate a life incident with you. This dates back to my first marriage, which ended 12 years ago, to Susan. Lucas and Laura were my 2 children from my 7 years of marriage. Back then, they were 3 and 5. Our lives were routine until that terrible morning, when I was traveling to my office and a car traveling from the other way collided with my vehicle. The next thing I recall is waking up on a hospital bed wrapped in plasters and bandages, and the nurse telling me that I had been unconscious for 2 days before I had awakened. I thanked my doctor, holding his hand, for saving my life. Though I was appreciative of the new life, I had no idea of the impending catastrophe. My doctor told me that I might never be able to walk again and that my lower body was paralyzed after a week of treatment. I was completely broken. When Susan heard this news, she broke down. She had to take care of the kids and the house in every way, so it was obviously difficult for her. I became depressed because I couldn't fathom living a wheelchair-bound existence. I cursed the way my life had turned upside down as I spent my days staring at the blank walls of my hospital room. I hated the thought that I would never be able to dance with my wife, play soccer with my kids, or experience freedom once more. In the first several days of my stay, Susan ceased coming to see me, which made my situation even more terrible. She came with the kids 3 times a week. I just lived for the times I spent with my family, but as the days went by, her visits were fewer and farther between. She would claim that the kids didn't want to see me as much as I begged her to get them to come visit me. I had no hope. After that, one day, she handed me the divorce papers, telling me that she deserved a normal man and that I definitely can't spend my life with a handicapped man. She added, "I'm still young and desirable." If I said I didn't see that coming, I would be lying. When she began to give me cold shoulders, I sensed that we were about to part ways, but I didn't anticipate it happening so quickly. A month following my accident, a few friends told me they had witnessed Susan idling around in the evenings and on weekends at the cafes and malls with a middle-aged man, most likely in his 50s. Some believed that she had an affair prior to my accident, while others claimed that following my misfortune, her desperation turned her into a chubby, ill-mannered old man. Barely 2 months had passed since my injury, I had not been released from the hospital, and I had received divorce papers. Even if I seem composed now, it wasn't me at all while I was in that situation. I felt hurt, bewildered, and heartbroken. I was poor, divorced, confined to a wheelchair, and had neither money nor income. Savings were not considered once the EMIs, home bills, and kids' schooling were covered. Fortunately, my insurance paid for a portion of my hospital expenses. Ultimately, I had nothing left over after having to spend all of my money to cover the outstanding bills. I wanted to scream, to bash my head against the wall, to swear at destiny. I'm not sure how I kept myself sane at the time, but I think it was the need for vengeance that kept me going. After being released from the hospital, I moved in with my parents. I was 35 years old, divorced, jobless, and physically and financially reliant on my elderly mother. My mother owned a tiny flower business in the suburbs. Her expenses were covered by her pension and the meager money she received from the shop. Even with those meager means, she offered to help. The most unsettling sense was that a 35-year-old man was dependent on his 60-year-old mother. I went to see my kids not long after I was released from prison. My home was locked when I got there. The neighbors informed me that Susan and the kids had moved in with her lover. My neighbors said that Susan's lover was an obese, elderly man who was filthy rich and childless despite having 3 divorces. Susan was even called a cheapskate and gold digger by some for sleeping with an obnoxious elderly man for his fortune. I was able to locate her boyfriend's address and made it to his home. When I got to Susan's new place, she wouldn't allow me see my kids because she thought my abrupt arrival would confuse them more because the kids had already gotten used to her partner and were calling him daddy. When I insisted that she see my kids, she threatened to get a restraining order against me. I had no money to hire an attorney. I backed off because I was living off of my mother's meager paycheck. It was only a few months after my divorce and less than 6 months after my accident. She already shared a home with a man. I was repulsed. I questioned her about how she could leave me and move on so fast. I understand I'm immature. I was a wheelchair-bound, defenseless parent. What other options did I have? I begged her to give me at least one opportunity to earn her respect. She called me a burden in life and made fun of me. Since our divorce was finalized a month ago and she had moved in with her partner, I questioned her about any extramarital affairs prior to the dissolution of our union. She yelled at me, telling me that I should never show her my ugly face and that it was none of my concern. I just stared at her, thinking back on the 7 years I had spent married to the lady who would in a few months take my position with another man. With teary eyes, I walked out of the place. The humiliation had crushed me by the time I returned home. My mother comforted me after I sobbed like a 5-year-old in front of her. She inspired me to take responsibility for my life. I had no idea what I was doing with my life and no purpose. I first went shopping with my mother. I assisted her in cleaning the store, serving clients, and creating bouquets. I quickly saw that there was a lot of room for growth in the business, but my mother was too weak to handle it alone. I reached out to former acquaintances in order to negotiate contracts with event coordinators to provide flowers for the occasions. I gradually gathered a group of people, accepted jobs to decorate venues, and eventually started my own event management business. It took me a whole 12 years to start over in my own life. Throughout it all, my mother was there for me, encouraging and supporting me to get better. I found out a year after my accident that Susan was taking my kids and her lover and fleeing the city. When I arrived at the house, my kids had already left. I had hurried to meet them. Prior to that, I made several attempts to get in touch with my kids, but Susan would always insult me and push me away. With complete custody of the kids, Susan was able to make all of the decisions for them. I couldn't argue for joint custody since I was financially and physically incapable of doing so. Because I didn't have the money to employ a lawyer or because Susan had a wealthy boyfriend named Evan, I was unable to contest her restraining order. I had no idea whether or not he was with her prior to my accident or how he had entered Susan's life out of the blue. All I knew about him was that he had a lot of ancestral property and was a wealthy man. Over the past 12 years, I have attempted to meet my children every time I received a lead, but I have been unsuccessful. Susan said that her partner had the resources and connections to get away with anything, so she would have me jailed. By the way, despite living together for 12 years, that man never married Susan. I ultimately applied for joint custody a year ago. I was anxiously awaiting the stabilization of my event management company. I applied for custody and was granted 15 days in the end. Next week, they were going to my house via plane. Susan tried her hardest to challenge my plea in court, but I had a strong attorney who did an excellent job presenting my case, so I was granted 15 days. In addition, my grown-up children were asked if they would like to meet me and replied in the affirmative. I want to spend more time with my kids, even though I know I can't make up for the past 12 years. I'm excited and nervous at the same time as the big moment draws near. Now, they are 15 and 17. I am aware of how demanding today's teens may be. I pray that my kids aren't extremely cruel and toxic. Should I tell them the truth about their mother, and I'm not sure what story Susan has told him over the past 12 years? I'm not sure. What recommendations do you guys have for this? How do I go about approaching them? I'm both quite anxious and very excited. Let's post this and ask for a few remarks from the community. Kudos, man. You stood against all odds. Good luck, is the first comment made. The following response reads, I'd suggest take it easy and go with the flow. See how the children behave with you. Let them bond with their granny. Granny's bond can help you win your children. A final thought prior to continuing, don't spill the beans too soon. You'd sound desperate. See what they have for you. I'm sure your ex would have manipulated the kids to the core, so be careful if they're evil. Wow, OP, this is awful. I'm so sorry this has all happened to you. In times like these, we really should be able to turn to our partners and family for support. I'm so sorry you weren't able to have that. You got through it on your own, and you are a strong and brave man despite the cards that were dealt to you. Thankfully, you came out alive and you do have the chance to see your children again. This is something to be grateful for. They do want to meet you, so that's a very good sign. Just be yourself and soak up every moment you can with them. First update. Hi everyone, I have a lot to report. In my initial post, I omitted 2 important details. First, a word about Amy, my current wife. Yes, 5 years ago, I remarried to a stunning woman. Amy works as an interior decorator. I first got to know her at a function where we were providing the flowers and she was arranging the wedding location. I hadn't launched my own business yet. Although it wasn't love at first sight, we had a good vibe. Over the next few months, we continued to get together for these kinds of occasions and grew close. Her daughter, who was 3 years old, was under her care alone. She had the contacts and industry experience from her many years of employment at one of the companies, which gave her the idea to launch the event management company. To start the business, I collaborated with her. We were together for a year after our first date. As of right now, Amy, my mother, her daughter Mia, and I make up a joyful family of 4. My mother and her kid were both thrilled to have a grandmother. The second piece of information concerned accident benefits. Ideally, the logistics business that owned the truck should have reimbursed me for being hit by a fast truck. However, at that time, the firm was able to avoid paying anything by falsifying the accident's details and placing the responsibility on me. I didn't get paid since I couldn't afford to employ a skilled attorney at the time. Large corporations, as you are aware, pay their lawyers enormous sums of money in order to get off their backs. Amy advised me to refile the case when we were married because we could now afford a qualified attorney. Although the matter is still pending, my attorney has offered us encouraging indications that the verdict will be in our advantage. Okay, let's get back to my tale. My children were meant to see me 3 months ago, as I indicated in my initial message, following a 12-year divorce. While I was anxious and excited, Amy helped me to relax and encouraged me the entire time. I went to the airport to pick them up. Now, Laura, the older, is 15, and Lucas, the younger, is 13. They have developed into stunning and attractive teenagers. After exchanging pleasantries, we were at a loss for discussion. We were all 3 uncomfortable. I made an effort to strike up a conversation by inquiring about their city and school life as we drove from the airport to the residence. I purposefully avoided the discussions about their mother. They also didn't mention her. The kids were remarkably quiet, or perhaps they were just waiting for any excuse to put in their earbuds like any other adolescent. Amy greeted us when we arrived home. The children appeared surprised, as though they hadn't expected this to happen. I'm not sure why Amy's mother's ability to cohabitate with another man within months of our divorce surprised them. Why am I unable to get married again? Amy had prepared the children's guest room. During our shared lunch, Amy presented the family's planned vacation schedule. They responded to everything in an unbiased manner. They weren't enthusiastic or disbelieving in the concept. Their erratic response perplexed Amy and me. Soon after they locked themselves in the room, their mother Susan called and accused me of lying to our kids. She said that the reason I had brought the kids to my house was so Amy and I could control them. I was confused by her actions. She said that I was lying to her about my marital status. Her charges made me ponder. Though I hung up on her, she continued to call. I made the decision to confront the big issue. I asked my kids over the phone what was wrong. They hesitated a moment before speaking. They believed that I had abandoned them, which is why they were furious with me. The kids had been brainwashed by Susan to be against me and to believe nothing but lies and dishonesty. I told them the whole truth, which is that their mother did not jump to another man at the first chance. Even though they were little at the time, they have vivid memories of those events. I explained to them how Susan had threatened and driven me away every time I attempted to get in touch with them, disappearing with them to the old man's place. I presented them with the restraining order along with all of my denied requests to meet with them. They were crying and felt bad for having spent so much time believing their mother's falsehoods. When Lucas, my younger son, tried to contact me on social media, he confessed it, but Susan caught him. She used emotional coercion to get him to vow not to get in touch with her ever again. The kids also acknowledged that Susan's husband had chastised them. Because Susan and the kids were single, they suffered mistreatment during the family get-togethers. Susan remained his mistress, staying in his home. They never saw the man as a father figure, even though he paid for their schooling. When I learned of my children's struggles, my heart hurt. We sobbed uncontrollably and hugged each other after disclosing everything. We had a terrific experience traveling to Florida for a week-long vacation. Amy and Mia, who was 8 this year, grew close to Laura and Lucas. It makes me very happy to see my entire family together. My kids shared our family's group pictures to social media with the message "Happy Family." Susan called them up and chastised them for their irresponsible behavior as soon as she viewed those photos. When they bonded with us, she accused them of betraying her. She threatened to stop allowing me to see my kids through text messages if I did anything to make them oppose her. I scoffed at her base threats and carried on with our trip. Following their holiday, my kids got together with my family. I was happy to see the old relationships renewed, and my relatives entertained them with great pleasure. Susan threatened to break up with them, but they vowed to stay in touch as they prepared to leave. They said they would move back with me after they graduated from high school since they felt stifled living in that house. I said farewell and gave them a hug. They confronted Susan about her evilness once they returned, but she turned the tables on me and said I was using them against her. Though they haven't been back for a few months, we still communicate frequently. I look forward to seeing them again. I'll keep you informed if anything changes. Many thanks. Whoa, it must feel amazing to have everything out there and to be completely honest with your children. Even their own mother couldn't accomplish that. She's scared of the repercussions of her actions and still can't accept responsibility for what she did to you all those years ago, as seen by her threat to have you turn them against her. Her deceit meant your kids would have to grow up without their dad. Updated again. Hello everyone, I realize it has been a while since my last update. Since my initial meeting with my children 3 months ago, there has been a great deal of drama in the past 6 months. The logistics company's pending lawsuit was resolved. What do you think? I received a sizable settlement for both the accident and the unfairness of the first trial. I don't know if I brought this up during the first trial. The logistics business manipulated the case and placed the responsibility for the collision on me after they crashed into my car. I received no payment at all as a result. On my wife's advice, I filed an appeal once more, and this time I was successful. My kids were just as thrilled when I told them the news. They requested to meet me, and I assured them that they would be living with me indefinitely. After a month, Susan arrived at my workplace. She grasped my hand and begged for my pardon. Her quick appearance surprised me. She said that she became desperate following my injury. She discovered the elderly man who desired a sugar baby. That day, I ran a Google search and discovered all these phrases. After a few months, the man had a terrible experience with a younger woman who stole his money. Thus, he made the decision to settle down with Susan, a 32-year-old sugar baby at the time. Susan's allegiance was ensured by the fact that she had 2 children. The man had made it very apparent that he did not want to share the fortune with my children, therefore he would not marry her and would instead keep her as his mistress. Since he assured her that he would provide for their food and education, Susan accepted his requirements. I questioned her about her lack of employment. She claimed that she had never worked and that she didn't know if she could pay for the kind of life that her partner had given her for nothing. She reiterated that she took all necessary precautions to safeguard the children's future. Standing on her territory, she declared that if she hadn't taken that action, the kids would have grown up in poverty. She was bugging me so much that I yelled at her, telling her that if she was so worried about her kids' futures, at least she should have given me a chance to get over it. Rather of assuming the worst and leaving me in the dark, she ought to have talked to me about that. I explained that her entreaties were irrelevant because I had moved on. She recapped all of our wonderful memories together, including our wedding day and the births of our 2 kids. I dismissed her, telling her that all those memories had vanished and that I was now a different person. They held no significance for me. When she said that she and my kids, not Amy and Mia, were my original family, she crossed her lane. She argued that Mia was not my daughter and that Amy and Mia would never make a good family. Her nasty mentality repulsed me. She begged me to accept her back so the family could get back together. I told her that Amy and Mia are my true family, not her, and that I loved them. She made a scene and wouldn't leave my office. It was only when I threatened to call the police that she departed. I told my mother and Amy about this when I got home. Naturally, Amy was upset by this, but she's a grown-up. It didn't treat it as special. My mother claimed that Susan's selfishness was the reason she was never fond of her. Mom went so far as to say that the money I got after the court settlement was the main reason Susan came back to me. Indeed, that woman is a gold digger. My kids chastised their mother and warned her to stay in her lane after they found out about her actions. She attempted to contact me again, but I'm not sure how her sugar daddy found out about it. He had threatened to toss her away. I am incredibly grateful to him. As of right now, my kids will be moving in with me this month. They would come and go from our house, and I would place them at a local college. They intended to stay in a dorm and have a good time while attending college. We should stay in touch, but we should also give ourselves time to get to know one another. After the children deserted Susan, all that was left for her was her sugar daddy. I'm hoping she gets to savor the sweetness before it goes bad. Let's get some feedback from the community. To start with, I really enjoy how you poke fun at our sugar daddy situation. Susan is a freeloader who grabbed at the chance to help the elderly man. It's true that she cheated on you before receiving the greatest outcome possible. Another comment said, "Please give me the lawyer's contact information. Someone I know is mired in a comparable legal battle. I adore how you overcame all obstacles to win. Man, good luck." It's hardly shocking that she returned after you received a substantial payment. Just like you, she lost her children and had nothing left. At last, everything caught up with her. Best wishes to you and your children. The road ahead appears to be bright.